G'day, guys. I've just wrapped up my interview with Bryce. I'm just editing it now. I thought I would just jump in to do a quick little intro. So, in this conversation, I originally went in just to talk about platforms and what platform I would choose for the e-commerce website that I'm building. But as a lot of good conversations generally go, it kind of went all over the place and we covered a lot of different topics. I thought it was a great conversation. Bryce is such a great guy and someone worth following. I've known Bryce for a few years now, and he's always been super supportive of my work and just a really kind guy. I've sent a lot of clients and business his way, and he's always looked after them. And Bryce is just one of those guys that, one, I really value his opinion on, and two, I just trust him a lot. So yeah, again, this conversation goes kind of all over the place. We cover everything from choosing a platform to going pretty deep on WooCommerce to talking about subscriptions and risk and how to choose a platform based on all your different business attributes. So yeah, it's a really enjoyable conversation. Hope you guys get something out of it. It's about 30-40 minutes. So yeah, enjoy, and I'm going to press play. Like when I started with e-commerce, it was like Woo for everything. Like I've spun up more Woo stores than I have shop, but it's been so long since I have played with a WooCommerce store, and so I'm kind of curious, like what's new and how have things kind of improved over the years.
I think the improvements that they're making have been a lot around performance. So, but that's like it's a very long process because of backwards compatibility. So, moving a lot of data over to like dedicated tables. So it's kind of removing their dependence on WordPress's data structure. So that's been a lot of the work they're doing, but it's still a work in progress. But in doing that, they've been improving the API like in the product to be a lot more powerful and flexible and easier to integrate and build your own endpoints for. So even for their like new kind of dashboard and reports that they're building now, that's all powered by the API that they've built. So it's come a long way, which means that it's a lot easier for you now to build stuff using their API than it used to be. Before, a lot of times I'd see like plugins or services like me build custom plugins and code just to provide the data, like build their own API completely, which creates a whole lot of issues with if you don't do authentication properly and security and everything and compatibility and stuff. So it's really great that they've been making the changes to make that not necessary anymore. It's kind of redundant, and it's come a long way. It is really quite powerful now. But your question regarding like stores doing cool things with it, there are so many. The problem is they're all you don't really like hear about it too much because people kind of don't talk about it when they figure out something really cool.
Sure.
But
That's kind of why I wanted
I've
to
seen,
ask,
yeah,
because like you do have so much exposure
yeah,
running Metorik, so it's kind of like,
exactly. I
yeah.
see some really cool stores. Like, there's some on the simpler end, like, and I love these guys just because they're like another Oz business and just really, really cool. Like product and marketing and everything. And I use the product. So it's like, they're called Scratch. It's like dog food and Australian company. So subscription, you get your dog food delivered, but it's very transparent, like the whole process, how they make it and what goes into it. But what they do that's really cool, because it's subscription dog food, their boxes, like the size of a box is the same. It doesn't matter like if you have a big dog, small dog, whatever. It's a 7.5 kilo box, so not like one of those 20 kilo ones, which it can be really good, but it creates these issues where it's like not everyone will be on the same schedule. It can't just be like monthly, bi-monthly. It can't be I want monthly, but my dog's big, so I need 15 kilos, or I need like something like 16 or 14.
Sure.
So what they figured out, which is really clever and how they built it, is you kind of give it the specs of your dog. So you're like,
Cool.
yeah, I've got a Shiba or a Corgi. This is how old they are. And then also their weight and stuff like that. And then they've also worked with like a pet nutrition expert to figure out, or based on all those factors, how much should they be eating every day and all that. And once they know how much a dog is eating, needs to eat every day, and which of the like formulas, which of like the varieties they need, they can then say, all right, well, like for Jarvis, my corgi, he's not too big, so he only needs like a box every 50 days or 40 days or something like that. So it basically creates a subscription for that interval that I need. So it's like, well, your dog needs 7.5 kilos every 45 days. We'll just bill you every 45 days, or you need it every 38 days, or it's custom to the day. And that's
That's
just,
cool.
for me, as a consumer, it's amazing. And just from my point of view as a business owner, it's genius. Like you're not trying to like box your customers into a selection. It's you're
Mm.
saying, well, this is a subscription that's meant for you, but it's done all programmatically, so they can say, well, it's a daily subscription, but it's on an interval of every 40 days or every 50 days.
On the practical side of that, like, have they just basically built their own little PHP module that does like that calculation, or their own like WooCommerce, or have they like stitched it together with a
Yeah.
couple of plugins?
No, I remember, and I don't know, today, but I remember when I was talking with Mike about it ages ago, who started up with co-founders Doug, and they got some, help on the PHP side, kind of building this out. But I'm pretty sure they didn't even have to do anything too crazy like that. It's because the beauty of it is that it's not, they're like taking what's already out there as the product, which is
Mm-hmm.
WooCommerce, and WooCommerce is like subscriptions plugin, the module for it. And they're just saying, well, let's just use that in how we need it. So instead of them creating custom subscription periods for every day or every possible period, their approach is really smart to say it's a daily subscription, but it's on an interval. So it's almost like a monthly subscription that gets billed every 2 months.
Mm.
That's built into subscriptions. You can do that out of the box. So they've just said, well, in this case, it's a daily subscription, but it's every 40 days, every 50 days. And the only really complex part on the code side there is just saying, well, taking all that data in about the
Mm.
dog and then deciding the interval. But then you're just creating the subscription with like programmatically. So in that case, if it was me doing that on my site, I'd probably just make a little plugin that kind of extends it or fills in the gaps there. But it wouldn't be like a very complicated thing to do because of how much is already there to work with in subscriptions and in WooCommerce.
Yeah, that's
So I
cool.
can imagine like the code for that would, well, the part about determining the interval is a little bit trickier, but that again, like, if you didn't want to build that inside of WooCommerce, you could just make this kind of headless app that sits on the side and you feed it the data and it spits out what you need.
Mm.
But so I think that's one of the nicer things about Woo as a platform, is that it's so easy to even integrate your own custom apps outside of it into it.
Yeah, I think what's kind of like interesting that like now I'm kind of thinking about, because originally I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go with Spree and I'm just gonna like customize Spree
Mm-hmm.
and bend it to work for me. But I don't know, I'm
Mm.
kind of liking the idea of just building a nude app, so just like a starter app
Yep.
in Rails, get the main kind of navigational and the marketing stuff done. So I have the nice,
Mm.
build out all my landing pages, build out
Sure.
everything that I kind of want, and then have a platform, whether that's like Woo or Shopify or something off to the side, and I just use that for order processing. And I don't.
Yeah, that's pretty popular inside like the Shopify world, I think, right? Like where I mean,
Mm,
I even remember seeing so many different sites that were built on WordPress and even WooCommerce for the marketing side, but the
yeah.
checkout happened in Shopify, and it's always an option. I think it just depends how much you want to do, and
Mm,
and which will be faster initially, but also which will provide you with the flexibility you need later, and then also, like you maybe by building a completely custom app to do all the navigation and marketing side of things, it creates more headaches down the line when you need to always keep it up to date, right?
mm.
That could be like a caveat there.
Yeah, that's true. Which again then pushes me back to like the Spree side, because they've got a nice back end for menus and navs and all that, which I could plug into.
Sure.
But yeah, I guess, and WordPress is kind of nice for, let's say, like I want to get my team involved. Having
Yeah.
a nice backend like WordPress where the team can actually dive in, edit stuff, is better than going from scratch. So I guess like that's a consideration that I'm gonna have to make.
It is. It also is like I don't know about free commerce because I haven't used it much, but and I'm just looking now and it is like an open source, e-commerce platform. So it's kind of similar in that sense, but I think I'd feel comfortable using either that one or Woo because you still have that ownership over all the
Mm,
work you're doing. It's
mm.
not like someone can take it away from you or can charge you extra for what you're doing later. And you're like, oh, you want that API? Well, then you've got to pay for this plan. And it's nice when you kind of have more ownership over that.
Yeah, no, I think that's true, and especially when, and we won't touch on it too much, but especially with a lot of apps getting removed from certain marketplaces and a lot of risk
Yeah.
there. I think like, yeah, it's annoying when you realize, all right, that's disappointing. A core part of my business is getting like ripped out, and
Yeah.
I don't really have another choice. Whereas if you've kind of got rolled your own application, whether that's on Woo or it's on Spree, at least you kind of have and own that domain, and there's some certainties behind that, and you're like, well, okay, as long as my hosting's paid for, like things like that, world's always going to be the same, and I'm not going to
Yeah,
wake up
and
one
even if
day.
it isn't, it'll adapt. Like, a lot of people, like my customers, when I speak to a lot of them, ask me about platforms, and they're like, well, we're on Woo, but we're thinking about Shopify, we're thinking about this custom one or something like that. And I'm like, well, one of the things you've got to keep in mind with Woo, and this applies to Spree as well, or any open source software, is that you're ultimately in charge of your fate with it. And even if they make a decision like, well, we're not developing this open source anymore, we're doing this, the licenses are still in place. So even if like WooCommerce as an example said, well, we don't want the API in there anymore, I can just, as a third party like that relies on that API, I can just build it into a plugin and they can install it in WordPress. If Automatic or WooCommerce or any other platform that is open source, and then they say, well, it's not open source anymore, and it's a big change, so it doesn't really happen because normally these companies, especially like Automatic, are built on the concept of open source. They don't just abandon it like that. But even hypothetically, worst case, it happened, then the stores that are running on that software, they don't care. They can just keep running on what they've got, and then the open source community will like adapt, and people that are passionate about that, like me, will get involved and then try to take over some of the maintenance or fork it and build a new project that people move to. And yeah, it's nice to have to not have your fate determined by like one person or one company. So I always take that approach. But then again, if you've got like a really simple product and you just want to get a store up and running, you can go with Shopify or any platform, and you are still in control enough that you can just start a new store on a different platform if you need to, because there's not that too much invested in the platform. It's more like your product speaks for itself and determines how your business goes.
Yeah. How do you kind of think about there's that kind of mantra of getting it, like, don't overcomplicate things, just get the store up, just start selling the product, like that kind of attitude versus like, I guess where you and me probably side, where we're like, we want to own the whole stack and like we enjoy playing with the tech and we enjoy building out. Like, how do you kind of how do you rationalize those two attitudes? Because again, I always side with fuck it, like I'm just going to build because I enjoy it. I get like a kick out of building and playing with software and tinkering.
Yeah, I think I'm similar to you like that, and I think that's okay. And it's just good that we have that ability, or anyone that does have that ability and also gets joy out of it, then why not? Like, there's no rules, right? But it's and you don't want to delay the birth of something just because, like, maybe you do if it's worth it. If you get enough joy out of that development process and doing things from scratch, then that can be worth missing out on a couple months of revenue, and it also might set you up to have more success later. But it's like a very individual decision in that, what do you need to get out of that project? Is it a fun one like you're doing, or is it, your life and blood, and there are employees waiting every day that there's no revenue, their jobs are on the line? So I think there's not really an answer that works for everyone there, but I'm embrace it if I was you. Like, if you love it, just do whatever is going to be fun, because you want to ultimately enjoy yourself. But like, if that's your goal is like the process of figuring things out, improving as a developer or whatever it is, like, then you should do the things that support that goal. But if your goal was like, I want to make money tomorrow, okay, maybe use the platform or set up that will enable you to do that.
Yeah, that seems true and accurate. I think, like, if you have the luxury of time and like you're using building a store as a fulfilling project, then roll your own software, explore that, and go deeper. And if you've got to pay bills, then screw it. Like, run Shopify, run Magento, just get something up. Maybe not Magento, like run Shopify.
Yeah, and you can always that's true. You can always run that and then change later, or vice versa. But you can't get back time, I guess. So maybe then like going for something that's really quick to set up is a good option. And it's like, even with friends that come to me and this probably happens to you and anyone involved in e-commerce, but friends come to you and they're like, I want to set up a store. What should I use? And I'm like, well, it doesn't really matter today. Just get up something, whether it's Woo or Shopify or even Magento or BigCommerce or anything, get it up and running. And then you can always change later. Especially if you're just a simple store that doesn't invest too much in the platform. It starts to get complicated when you've got subscriptions and things like that, because then it might be a little bit harder to migrate, but especially for like a one-off purchase kind of product, it just doesn't matter because you can always move later without too much of a disruption.
Are there any when you are choosing a platform, are there any things that, like, let's say a friend or someone that's asking your advice says that really steers you down one path or the other? Like,
Without a doubt.
so like, let's say subscriptions or that kind of stuff. So I'm just kind of curious on what are some questions that push people down hard lines.
Subscriptions, number one, and then straight away just saying to them, use WooCommerce. And I've got like friends, and I know people running huge Shopify like subscription stores, and I always say to them like, why did you choose Shopify, or do you regret choosing it, or anything like that? And they're always like, yes, it's not good for this.
And I've never worked with Shopify subscriptions. Like,
neither have I.
What makes that horrible for them?
I think it's that I don't know enough to give a very expert opinion, but my basic understanding is that a lot of the subscription stuff on Shopify has to go through external platforms like Chargebee or Chargeify, and there's Recurly, there's like so many, and well, that creates a whole lot of issues. Firstly, straight away, because you're like locking yourself into another platform that you normally need to pay 1% of every transaction to, on top of maybe you're paying Shopify and you're paying the payment processor. So that's always a little uncomfortable. And then I think the other part of it is that because there's so many of these different apps that integrate with Shopify, the integrations are probably not always great. And they're also integrating with not just Shopify, but maybe they're integrating with Woo or Magento, BigCommerce, and 10 other platforms. So it's hard for them as a subscription platform to integrate really nicely into all these. So for me, Woo's always appealing because it's built just for Woo, and it's like owned now by Automatic. They bought WooCommerce subscriptions from Prosperous and built it, and it's like the main one. It's not like there's like 5 or 10 real viable options. It's mainly just that one, and I think there's a couple others that would be pretty good. But at least from my experience, because we have so many subscription features in our product that are built for the official WooCommerce subscriptions plugin, I'll probably get a message every month, like from someone who's like, we're using WooCommerce and we're using subscriptions, but we're not using the official one. And it's a little bit tough to say to them, sorry, like we can't do anything for you. But at least for me, as an external service, I can provide a really tailored product for that one because I know that majority are using it. While if I'm like, building my product for Shopify stores, I've got to try to integrate with 5 or 10 different subscription platforms. Maybe even if I do that, how do I choose which ones? And it's always going to be a little bit inadequate because it's like I'm trying to do it for 3 or 4 at once. While with Woo, I can really, dedicate myself to how they've designed them. That's just subscriptions. But then on the other end, like similar to what you were just saying, if someone wants to build something really custom, even if it's not subscriptions, but they want to have a lot of control of the process, I tend to steer them towards Woo. Also, if it's like very low margin, I tend to steer them towards Woo because on Woo, you're not paying you never have to pay 1% to anyone like besides payment provider. And that's very appealing, especially because you can have like monthly running costs that are tiny, like hosting. It's normally going to be pretty affordable if you do things right. Software, there are a lot of like plugins that are there. Like now these days, they're not one-off purchases, they're annual purchases, but they're very cheap. Subscriptions, I think, is $200 a year. That's like $16 a month for subscription functionality. Doesn't matter.
I've got some price hasn't. Yeah, it's funny that price hasn't increased. Yeah. What do you say?
I've got some subscription customers with hundreds of thousands of like active monthly subscriptions each, right? And for some of them, they're paying $16 a month for their subscription functionality. So $16 a month to process 100,000 like renewals, and that's just an amazing value. It starts obviously like on all platforms, you're going to run into like SaaS costs and pricing, like from customers that are using us to MailChimp to there's so many different like extra third-party apps that you need these days. So it's not like unavoidable on WordPress and WooCommerce, but at least for like the core functionality in your store, you're going to get away with paying like maybe 500 to 1,000 a year for all the things you need, and then you're paying for hosting and things like that. But it can be a lot cheaper at scale because of that predictability with that pricing, and also just really having ownership over the relationship you have as a store with customers, and not having anyone in the middle that can take a cut or that can control who your payment providers are or any of that. And then, it even goes back to like the industry they're in. For us, a large number of our customers are cannabis or CBD related stores, and they've had issues over the years with different platforms. But with Woo, again, they have that control over their destiny, and as long as they can find the partners they need to work with, like payment providers and all of that, they can do that, and they can really thrive there without ever having that fear that they'll wake up in the morning and the platform they're on has decided, well, we're not going to allow you to work with us anymore.
Yeah, I think if you have any business that has like an ounce of anxiety, it probably makes sense not to go with a large player like Shopify or a platform, right? Because you're right, like if you're in CBD or let's say, from my understanding, Shopify is doing a thing natively with subscriptions. So then then I ask,
that'll be great.
Well, it would be great, but then what happens with all the existing integration partners? Do they get removed?
Yeah.
And then what?
Yeah, I don't know.
And then if they get removed, what happens to all the active subscriptions? So it becomes like, I don't know.
Right,
those things become very, very messy really, really fast. And again, if you own your own platform, you are less worried about that. And the kind of like realm of anxieties becomes much more constrained to things that at least you can control, which is like your payment processor. And there's plenty of payment processors that will take CBD instead of, if you can't get Stripe, then you can.
Because of how open like that market is, and it really scares me when e-commerce platforms and the markets like become a lot more isolated, where you don't have many options, and then these issues happen, where people are. It's not just like on a pricing side where the prices are just there's no competition, but also as a business you start to be like blocked out. And what if like tomorrow Shopify, Woo, and BigCommerce and maybe Magento all have these rulings about how they don't want to work with cannabis businesses, even though it's legal wherever these businesses are, they're operating legally. They're just saying, well, it doesn't really suit us. And then it's really awful for the companies involved, because they're not doing anything wrong, but they're paying the price for these external decisions being made.
Yeah. No, it is really tricky. The other thing that, as you were talking, I was like hearing was the average order value is also a decision point. So it's kind of like anxiety around your industry and changes that could happen in the near future, and then you combine that with like average order value, which is like anything that is low enough where every bit of margin helps, then like you'd need to choose a thing like WooCommerce, which keeps those costs kind of under control, and you're not, you're basically just spending money on marketing versus constantly worrying about the stack up of, I don't know, all these different apps which add to, I guess, your overhead. Yeah,
no, you're right. It's something that I think a lot of people don't think about because it doesn't affect them, but the people that it does affect, it severely impacts them to the point that it could be like, destroy their business or the profitability of their business, or just like the viability of it. It can all be questioned when all these factors kind of come into play, and it might not affect 90% of businesses, but the 10% that are affected would really hurt. But that also means that they're really able to like spend and commit to different platforms that work with them on that level, because it's finally someone's not playing around with their fate.
Is there a certain size of business? Like, does the size of business and like the transaction volume dictate which platform one would choose? Like, are you noticing those decisions happen? Because like I'm seeing businesses of, I guess, any size go to any platform, but I guess you've got a lot more exposure than I do. Like, are you seeing, businesses above a certain amount of, is it volume? Is it transaction size? Like, does that dictate?
It's pretty
anything?
Spread out. Like, I've got some customers that operate on a lot of free orders, or maybe like $1 orders, especially for like downloadable stuff. But I've got, one customer, I was looking at their store, they have like a bottle of wine the other day listed for 100,000 US for one bottle. So I think, but it probably would play a part. And if you're operating, like, if you're selling products at a pretty high value, like average order value, you don't really want to give away a percent of that. And I think because a percent of 10K, like a 10K order, 1% of that's like $100, and then it just really adds up. So that'd be a factor, but I don't know enough about Shopify or the other platforms, kind of like pricing models. If it gets more expensive, the more orders you have, that would be a factor. We do see, like, at least on Woo, I see a decent number of drop shipping businesses, and I always thought that they would stick around with Shopify, and it seems like they're the bigger ones, at least. Like, when I talk about drop shipping businesses that I'm seeing, a lot of them are pretty successful stores with higher volume. So they at least seem to be moving to Woo, and that could just be a matter of again, like just you're operating on a thin margin, and especially with drop shipping, your margin is really tiny because you don't like own the manufacturing process and everything like that.
The other thing with Shopify is stores get banned. So I've heard about like
Really?
I had one friend who had a very successful store, and it was a good business, and
Yeah.
someone cloned his store, ran basically traffic to it, and then took all the money, shut it down, and then the complaints went back to his store, and then his store got shut down on Shopify, and he was just like, oh like what, like how'd that happen? And
Yeah.
again, you
So
have
frustrating. I've seen the same with Amazon.
yeah, exactly the same with Amazon. So I think when you are on these
Yeah, like
platforms,
I've seen that happen with Amazon, where like one person, starts a fraudulent like copy of someone's product, and then Amazon catches them out, but then people are complaining because they're like, well, I got this product, but and of course they're going to the brand to complain, but even though they didn't make it, and they're just a victim to it, but then Amazon's penalizing them because it's still their brand that they're getting complaints about, even though Amazon facilitated someone doing fraudulent activity against them.
yeah, it's
So crazy, right?
Yeah, no, it's crazy. And again, like the platforms, you can't blame them. Like if it's like low risk for them just to remove, in their eyes, a small seller who is high risk for any issues. So, but whereas again, if you roll your own, you're generally safe when these issues pop up, and you can kind of deal with them yourself, versus not even having the chance to deal with them. Like with my friend, where he didn't even get the chance to respond to customers. Like he did in the sense that he can reply, but they just shut down his store, so all the contact forms and everything got removed. So yeah, I don't know.
Frustrating.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, that makes me really uncomfortable. I think again, it just comes down to like the business's resilience and ability to quickly like move if they need to. And for some businesses, it's just like out of the question. Like especially if they don't have a lot of technical expertise inside of the business, they just might, even with a set moving, let's say from Woo to Shopify, it just might be too much work for them to do quickly, and they need external help, and that just makes it complicated. But if you're like selling a product that's simple, but you've also got some technical abilities on your team, maybe it doesn't really matter as much because you can adapt when you need to. But I'd hate to be that business with like that doesn't have that, because for a lot of businesses, like the technical side of things is not a priority, so they're not going to invest in resources like in staff that can handle that, because they're happy to spend the money on Shopify, or they're happy to give a % up on Amazon to not deal with that. But then all of a sudden they have to deal with it, and they don't have the resources. It's just like both things at once happening.
Sure.
Where there's not much upside for them besides they just want to get back online and get back to selling.
Sure. What about the app marketplace on the Woo side? Like, are you seeing?
Yeah.
Oh, you want to dive in?
No. Go.
I was going to say, yeah. On the app side, like, is, from my understanding, because Woo's been around for so long, like the amount of coverage on things like an app for post-purchase upsells, an app for email marketing. I know you do that with like Metorik Engage. Like, are you finding the app ecosystem is like fairly vast with Woo?
It's vast, but it's not refined. So, especially with their marketplace, and I know that they're making efforts like at the moment to improve it and to firstly to make it more open, but then also to have more vetting in place, so it's only really they're offering good solutions. But you're never really short on options, and because it's so easy to integrate with, like every day there's a new one, or if you like work with a 3PL and then they don't integrate with Woo, they can pretty easily get something up and running. So that's an advantage, but the disadvantage is that when you're like the store owner and you're just looking for something like post-purchase upsells, or it could be abandoned cart tracking, there are so many options, which is good and bad. It depends on the store. Some stores, I think, and some people love that. They're like, yeah, I get to try 10 different apps, but some people that's a nightmare. To me, like, I don't want to try 10 different apps when I use it. Like, I just want to use the best one, and worst case, like if that doesn't work, I'll try the second best one. Maybe you're the same. Like, it's just not where we want to invest all our time.
Yeah.
So
I generally pick like
that's useful.
Yeah, I generally pick like the tool that I don't know I align with as far as the marketing insight's concerned, and then I just go and I kind of ignore everything else.
And that's one approach. But the problem is, at least with Woo, is that you just don't have. It's not refined enough that you can go in and look at like their marketplace and say like, all right, these are because for a long time Metorik wasn't there, but at the same time, Metorik was or at that, like before we were on Woo's marketplace, I think we already had 200 or 300 customers that had all found us organically. But for us, for them, like we were the thing keeping them on Woo as a platform. Like a lot of those 200 or 300 stores at that time were saying, and this is also years back, so Woo wasn't as good as it is now, but they were saying like we'd move if we didn't have you. We'd move to Shopify, we'd move to BigCommerce, and they didn't even know about me. They had to like through the marketplace. So there could be that disconnect. There might be apps like that today that if I went on their marketplace and I want to find a really good app for some kind of thing, and it might not be there, even though the perfect one exists. And that's, to me, as a store owner, can be frustrating because I can't really reliably look in one place for everything I need.
Yeah, no, that is, yeah, that is super interesting. On the 3PL side, because I want to dive back onto that, because that was something I was thinking of. A lot of clients and friends have always had issues on the integration side with 3PLs because like generally 3PL technical teams aren't so savvy. Again, are you finding it a lot easier for 3PLs to integrate with Woo? Because I remember trying to do it, this was maybe 6 years ago. It was a pain in the ass. Same with Magento. But
it would have been bad back then.
Yeah,
it'd definitely be better today.
Cool.
I think just the API is good enough that it's not that it's good enough. It is really good, but it has enough functionality that any developer with a decent amount of experience will have no problem integrating into it and making something work. Even if they don't, now these days you don't have to have like a developer with PHP experience because it's just an API. They can use whatever they want to build that way on their end, on the 3PL end, or whether it's like an app in the middle to talk to the store and then talk to the 3PL. So I'd be surprised if like it was that difficult today, but you never know. But I mean, just the fact that it's got an API, there shouldn't be any excuse from any 3PL. Like as long as there's an API that exists, like there's a way to integrate with it without too much work.
Yeah.
It's just always like the nuances of the platform, right? Like, and that's something that I've noticed recently, like how Woo considers it an order and how Shopify considers an order, and the data they store around it to do with the dates or payment methods and everything can be quite different. So I think that's the only thing to consider, that the platform, even though there's an API, it doesn't mean that the same code or same approach is going to work for multiple e-commerce platforms. You've got to kind of tailor it for each one. But at least the fact that it has an API means that you're not spending that much time on the code or integration side. It's more just writing the code to talk to the API, but being conscious of the differences in each platform.
Can I pause, make sure the recording's good?
Yeah.
And then ask you a question about the data side and geek out about that a bit, because I know you're. So now that we're back, the next question I was going to ask is like, you touched on the different data modeling in the different products, and you said there's like a bit of nuance there for people that like care about that nuance and are looking to integrate with WooCommerce and Shopify. What are the things that like, because again, for context, Metorik deeply integrates with Woo, and you are considering integrating with Shopify, and so you are.
Yeah, I think that I'll have to be pretty considerate of. I don't have all the answers yet, but at least I can say on the Woo end, a lot of it also comes down to the fact that because Woo is so customizable, and I'm sure this applies to other platforms, but so many things can be changed so that, by default in Woo you have six statuses like an order can be in, right? It could be like completed, processing, pending, payment, on hold, cancelled, and failed. From memory, those are the 6. But it's so easy to add like a 7th one or an 8th one, and there's a lot of reason to do that. And like some people, they will do like label printed as a status, or in the warehouse, or fraud, reviewing in case of fraud, right? It could be 100 different ones. I have some stores that I've seen make like 30 or 40 different statuses, so they can really like finally decide where it is in that order process.
Sure.
So yeah, but then if you're like that third party, whether it's Metorik or whether you're a 3PL or whatever it is, you've got to kind of be ready for that. You don't know what statuses you can, like you can check and plan accordingly, but you need to be, I guess, able as an application to adapt to the different statuses and what they could all mean. So an example for us is, is an order with the custom label printed status. It's one thing for us to bring that in and then to show it. So if you're looking in an order, you can see it's label printed, but then the question is that part of the report? And that depends on the store. Like they might say, well, if it's, in the fraud review status, we don't want it in our report because we're reviewing it for fraud. We haven't even accepted it. So that starts to get murkier. And then the other thing that comes to mind is like dates. So WooCommerce has a few different built-in dates that an order could have. It could have like a created date. Like it will have all these, but a created date, but optionally a paid date and a completed date. And they have different meanings depending on the store, but and also the payment method they use. And the payment method they use, if it's a custom one that's not that great, like the integration, it might not update the paid date properly, or they might not want to consider an order completed when it's completed. So maybe for some reason it doesn't get the completed date. And then as a third party app, you're like, well, what date did the order actually get completed? And you don't really know. So that's also tricky. And I'm sure there's other things I'm even forgetting. But those are the two that I remember when I was first building integration. I was like, well, I got to figure this stuff out. Like, and then I ended up adding settings for it because there's not really much else you can do. You can't make those decisions on behalf of the store. It's completely different for every store. So all you've got to do is kind of, as a platform, be able to adapt enough that that store owners can make things work how they need it to, but you need to also give them that flexibility.
So yeah. Like when you compare, let's say, Woo and Shop, are you seeing either company handling a lot of these things better? Are you seeing like Shopify handling certain things better, or like what are some kind of like interesting takeaways with how they've structured it?
I haven't looked at the Shopify structure enough to give an answer there. I imagine it would be better just because they've been doing it a long time and it's focus and like they've got huge resources in terms of development and also so many apps and integrations that the API would have to be pretty good. Like when I first built Metorik, I think I was one of the first apps to actually even use the API. And today, even there probably aren't too many that use the API. So when you don't have that many people using it, like I remember there were times where they were putting out a beta release and I'd test the beta and I'd be like, look, the authentication's broken, so the whole API doesn't work. And I don't blame them that much for that because there just weren't that many people using it that it wasn't a priority. Things are changing, but it'd definitely be like more people using the Shopify APIs. So I feel like they would be better, but there are still going to be these nuances, and also customizations are inevitable for stores. So it doesn't really matter, I think, what platform they use. I'll be very interested to see. And we should chat about this after when I've looked at it more. But it'll be interesting for me to learn more about how Shopify kind of tackles some of these issues with, something as simple as custom statuses and what's considered a successful order and what isn't, and dates and things like that. But and that's it's not that it's necessarily bad on Woo. It's just that it's just so easy to customize. So you're gonna, as a third party, you have to able to adapt to that. That's just like the reality of it.
Yeah,
there's not they can do to fix it.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess like pulling that back to the perspective of someone building a store, I think it's nice to know that like that dynamic's true on the developer side. That like when you are looking at the marketplace, like I think with Shopify, to a certain extent, they enforce a lot of these things. Like they got app. If you go to the marketplace and you look at the apps, they enforce certain code quality things now. I think more so than ever. Like each app is individually reviewed and they're checking stuff out, they're testing. And from my understanding, I think the video just cut out, but I think it'll pop back. Wait, let's see if we can get you back. You've become all
you turn it off and
on. Okay, I think now we're back. All right, yeah, back and handsome. So I think like in the Shopify side, they enforce a lot of these dynamics and make sure that certain things are true.
Cut out for a sec.
We back? Cool.
Hello.
There we go. I think we're good.
There we go.
Cool. I think on the Shopify side, they enforce a lot of these things at the platform level. So, when you install a plugin or an app, generally it's going to work, and generally they've got pretty good communication across the board and things are going to be reliable. My experience on the open source side, even on Spree, trying to install a couple of open source gems and trying to get that into the app, stuff is like old, it's deprecated, certain API endpoints don't work, column databases don't update, when they should, like what you were saying with Woo. And so I guess that makes things, when you do go down the open source route, you're kind of in open waters there and you're not really protected. And so when you are evaluating what plugins to use and setups. It's like good to use the official ones that have great support.
Exactly. Yeah, you got to be a little bit. There's a little bit more of like a burden on the store owner to make those decisions that are sometimes pretty hard to make, even like people that have a lot of experience. But I think it's just comes with the territory, and it can also be really good because you just have more like control over the whole process of how things integrate and everything comes together. So it depends on the resources that store has. So that's why it's like. I think a lot of people used to like start on Woo, and maybe it's still the case. They start on Woo and then they want to move to Shopify when they get bigger. But I also see a lot of the inverse, which is people starting on Shopify, just get a store up and running. They don't care about how much they're paying. They just want to like get revenue in, even if it has a little bit of, like it's not profitable. Then once they've like got that side of things working, like the product, and they've got customers, then they move to Woo because they know that they're keeping more of the money, but they're also have a bit more control over everything. So. Yeah, I don't think it matters too much at the start, but it definitely matters later on when you're trying to figure out integrations and stuff.
Yeah, no, sure. No, I think it's super.
Yeah.
This has been a fun convo.
I don't know if yeah, man, 100%. I think it's a lot of these things that just people don't think about, and people don't talk about too much because everyone normally has a agenda, and I think at least for you and me, like our agenda tends to be like, well, how can we just help people run their e-commerce stores better and make more money from them and stuff like that. Like, because at least for me, the platform is not the most important thing. The most important thing is the customer, like for me, my customers, and in that it's their store and how they operate it. And so, you know, if my customers say to me, we want to move platforms, and even they want to move to one that I won't support now and I won't ever support, I'm like, well, that's fine. Like, you've got to do what works for you as a business, because the platform you can either choose a different platform or you can bend the platforms you've chosen to fit your needs, but you can't, like your business and the relationship that they have with their customers is the most important thing.
Sure, well said. Well said.
I think about it a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I think like and I don't know, when we get to like another stage in this kind of like site build, I'll call you again and we can like freely chat about some of this stuff some more. But I think, yeah, I mean, I kind of want these conversations to be like this with friends that don't really have, I don't know, they're not going to be biased in any direction.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, because I think open discussions need to. Yeah, I think open discussions need to be had, so people can actually make like good decisions.
Yeah, without a doubt, man. Without a doubt. But we'll see what happens with the whole industry. Never know. But it's fun, you know. Things are always happening.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the good thing is Woo's been around for a while, Shopify's been around for a while, and so you can safely assume that if you choose either of those two, they're going to stick around for a fair period.
Yeah, and I want to learn more about the biggest brands as well, because I always look at, you know, and I'm sure you're the same, like you shop at a website or a brand and you're like, what are they using? And I'm like, well, like I remember looking at the Patagonia website years ago, and I was like, and this is like the US one, I was like, oh, they're on like Salesforce Commerce Cloud or something. All right,
I noticed that too.
I need to integrate with that. Right.
I've got like an item on my to do, which is like, integrate with Salesforce, and the only reason is because of Patagonia. I like saw them and I was like, oh wow, like
exactly.
I was like, Patagonia is and that's impressive.
And I'm just like, oh, I want to work with these brands, so how do I do that? But you're right, that like Woo and Shopify are definitely the main ones. Woo as a platform, but the numbers speak for themselves. Like the numbers that they say, which is like hundreds of thousands or millions of stores, and then at least from my point of view, like I have, and it's all public as well. Like I always tell people this, I'm like, I've got like 1,000 plus like individual customers, and they have, you know, on average like a couple stores each. So it's like 2,000 or 3,000 successful stores paying me every month a minimum of $20 a month, up to 1,000, 2,000 a month. Like these are all real successful businesses, and these are just the ones that have found me, and I don't even do much marketing. How many are out there? Every day I get like a new store signing up from a demo that I've never heard of, but has like hundreds of thousands of orders in their database.
Very cool.
And thousands of monthly ones. There are just so many, and I'm sure when I'm, you know, if we're on Shopify, like I'll see something similar there. But I guess for me, it's more of a surprise because I've been in the Woo world as long as Woo's existed, and there are just so many, and it always blows my mind because I didn't really fathom it's hard to take a number like 300,000 or 500,000 stores or whatever they say, the number of people using it. It's hard to really visualize that number, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, because you're not really like on top of a hill looking over the watering hole. You just like, yeah, like yeah, again on the marketing pages, you have like a little bit of an idea of how big the watering hole is, but really like everyone's blindfolded, and you walk in, and you know, it's a
Yeah.
yeah, it's a trip how many stores that there are, and I think like even some of the recent Shopify marketing where they're trying to like promote essentially getting more partners on. Yeah, you know, tens and tens of thousands of stores per partner, and I think that's the same on the Woo side. Like, there's tens and like
Yeah, yeah.
you've tapped into a very small percent of the market of the overall. So as an app developer, it's pretty exciting for you. Um,
Yeah, but I think it's exciting even on Shopify or any of these ones. Like, as long as you just do something that's, I mean, the bar is so low, which is a little bit, disappointing. It's just like there are so many like really bad solutions to all these things, or like very stale ones that were like really cool like 4 or 5 years ago, but they haven't updated or they haven't changed and adapted with like the industry. And bar is so low that if you can just firstly just do better, and not that you should just aim for the bar, always aim high, but and also just wait it out, like because at least for me, like the app, of course, has changed so much over the years and gotten better, but I don't know how much better it is, like as a comparison to like what it was after the first year. Like, of course, it has more features, but a lot of the work you do on an app as it goes on is refining things or adding little features here and there that don't individually move the needle, but maybe as a whole do. And to me, that a lot of the success just comes from waiting for people to discover it. Because my first year, like I had like, I don't know, so it's just, that means it's just a waiting game to eventually like have a big enough customer base.
Sure. You cut out a bit there, but I think we got the general bit when you're like, yeah, you're like, I'll get a big customer base. I'm like, yes, Bryce.
Oh man, how's it going with Bento? Like
Yeah.
customer wise?
Yeah, it's good. We're getting like our customer base is mostly coming through Twitter, which is kind of like fun. And a lot of it they're not standard integrations. So like we're not getting, because I don't integrate. Well, I mean, I don't have an app on the Shopify marketplace, and I'm not in Woo's, and so we
So
don't.
if someone finds you and then uses you in there on Shopify, and you're using like Shopify's API, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah. We have like
So
we've got like
you don't have to give them any money.
no. We have like an unlisted app, like it's a private app, and so they just install that, and they're kind of good to go, and the script gets automatically installed, and then we start kind of getting the webhook events. So
Are you allowed to do that? That's okay.
I think so.
But they don't mind.
I think so. I think it's fine.
That could be good. I just don't want to give 20%.
Yeah. I think like, yeah, I don't know what like an official integration's like. Like again, we're a small partner, and most of my integrations now at the moment are like with custom built sites. So like a lot of our customers, we've got like a rental booking customer in Australia. We have a large e-commerce site over in the US that is built on.
I think I know your Australian one.
Yeah. And like. And shout out to Mike if he watches this.
Yeah.
But with a lot of the customers, they're like custom integrations. I'm in their Slack and helping them kind of like build that out. And just like that's nice in the sense that it helps push the product along, because I'm getting like I'm basically in the work with them, and so that stuff's really nice. And I don't know, like we've tidied up a lot of the stuff on the Shopify side. But I'm just hearing like a lot of stuff that makes me really nervous and gives me a bit of headaches. And because we're an email.
Yeah, it's not what you want as an app. Like you want to focus on just providing the best product you can to your customers, right? Not about commissions you've got to give to people here and there and all that.
Yeah. And like, you have like you got an email marketing service, and like, so do we. It's kind of like, I don't know. I'm already fighting off spammers that like sign up and try to like import their email list and then bomb them, and I got to stop them. Like there's already a war there. I don't want a whole bunch of like small Shopify sites signing up, and so at the moment
I think like the cart hook approach is really cool, right? So like apply for you for access. That's one solution to that, I guess, right?
Yeah, I think Jordan's nailed it. Like I think Jordan was getting like an influx of high churn temporary customers essentially, and switching over to an apply to essentially be a partner with Cartalk was the right approach.
Yeah.
And potentially it's the right approach for Bento. Like, we're fine for people signing up and getting some use, but the small sites don't.
Don't get me wrong, I get tempted by that as well.
Yeah.
It just seems like so appealing to have control over the funnel, like that ultimate control. But it can also be bad for business, I guess. There's both sides to it.
Yeah. And for us, like, I think when people sign, like, the product come a long way now, and like when people sign up, it's a fun product to play with. Like, they get a lot of information they may not have got before. I think the tooling is like, there's a lot of kind of creative takes on some of the tooling that we've built. And we kind of need an open door because, like, you know, if we don't have a free trial, then they're not really going to take the risk on at least trying out and seeing like how we've approached the problem. So I think
we need to validate, like, to them the solution that's being solved, right?
Yeah, they need to know that, one, like, they can move away from MailChimp or Intercom. Like, on my end, they need to know that they can move away from MailChimp or Intercom and get the job done. And then they need to see that creatively we've approached those problems differently to those providers in a way that matches their taste. And when we've done that, we've won their business. And I can do that and demonstrate that on a call. But I have to make that onboarding experience. I had like one of my friends sign up the other day, and like he was just like, I don't know what to do when I start. Like, there's just so much there, and that's one of our problems, which is just like, how do you?
The onboarding is hard, man. I've had features like that where I like features that I think are the most essential part of Metorik, and people don't even use them after 2 years. It's like, that's not their fault. That's my bad. And it's like really bad because it's like, firstly, thank you for using it for all this time. But secondly, I'm so sorry that I didn't make it easier for you to find this crucial feature that is one of the main value points to the app.
Oh, totally,
You know?
totally.
Yeah.
And you know, the best that we can do is like even dog fooding Bento is I just kind of watch each customer and like the pages they're visiting and what they're doing. And then I don't know, I just get like weird use cases. Like a trend that I'm seeing is like, you probably get this on your end, which is I don't know if you ever heard, like, with LinkedIn and stuff, like the number one feature with LinkedIn was just checking out your own profile. In like Bento, it's just stalking customers. So like, you know, we track every visitor and stuff, and like the first thing people do is like go to the visitor panel, scan their visitors to see like who's recently bought, and then they bugger off. And they'll do that 2, 3, 4 times a day and not necessarily use any other features. So that's like a weird it's a weird like behavioral thing that I guess everyone's doing, because again, broadcasting you only have to do once a week. Live chat you do reactively, but you can also just respond on email. You don't have to log into the app. So really the back end is just there to check visitors, and even though there's all these other tooling there, it's, I don't know.
Yeah, it depends, like, the purpose of the tools. If they're like reaction kind of ones that you do based off something happening, or like could be like an example that something, an order came in, you need to react to it by fulfilling it or checking it for if it's fraudulent. But then the other is like proactive stuff, like I guess broadcasting or live chat's more reactionary. So I guess the goal, to figure out what the goal is the goal like engagement, and then I guess we need to trigger more reactions, or we need to like kind of promote more of their own actions. Like we need to, whether it's like sending an email saying like, you know, you haven't contacted your customers in a week, maybe you should send them a broadcast. Like that can kind of trigger them to take proactive measures, I guess.
Sure.
But it just depends on the goal. And like, I never like optimize. Yeah, try it. It could work. I've never done anything like that. We're very bad at all that stuff. Like we never did onboarding emails. I did like that one that you posted on Twitter once, which was like, you know, this is and I think you stole that from someone. Like, this is an automatic email. So I just want to say hi. Like, how'd you find us, right? That was like the first onboarding email I implemented, and I had that going for years, and I still have it, and I love it. And then once someone replies like, that's cool. Now, like, and it's been 3 years. So I'm really bad at that because I'm kind of hesitant to abuse the relationship with customers. Like I just don't want to annoy them too much. But sometimes that's doing them a disservice, because if by annoying them, it means like helping them figure out a part of the tool that will help them make more money. Well, maybe to them that's like, thank you for letting us know about it. So
Yeah, no, that's true. Like even on my end, like now as businesses are kind of struggling a bit, like reaching out and going like, how can I help? And a lot of helping is just like, I'll write an email for you. Like I know if you email your list, you will make money.
yeah,
But
exactly.
some business owners are too overwhelmed by that. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh man, it's hard, and I don't blame them because it's like from our point of view, like as in my point of view at least, I'm the same. Like I don't want to, especially when things are going okay, you don't want to like rock the boat too much and stuff like that. You just want to kind of let things go as they are. But so I say the same thing to customers sometimes. They're like, things are not as great now, and I'm like, well, what I can do is give you like let's say a few months of Engage, like our email product for free. Because it's like an
nice.
add-on. I'll be like, just keep paying for Metorik, but you can have this for free for a few months. It will make you so much money by just sending some emails to your customers. And they're just like, like that's not really what we want to do right now. I'm like, well, it's hard because we're like limited in our ability to help them if they aren't willing to do the stuff on their end. But at the same time, I completely get it because if like a third party app that I use kind of said that to me today, I'd be like, well, that's my decision, not yours. So I'll do it when I'm ready.
Well, what do you think? Yeah, what do you think that hesitancy is? Like, is it just there's so much going on with these businesses, or do you think it's like some cognitive thing that's blocking them?
I think it's like on the list like of priorities. Maybe the things that we think should be number one are just not, and maybe we're right, maybe we're wrong.
Mm.
Don't know, but sometimes I do think we just have you and I like have that experience of working with thousands of stores, so that or looking at the data for thousands of stores and understanding it and what works and what doesn't. And like I'm just when I'm talking to a store that's doing like $500 a month, I'm trying to give them advice based off what I've learned from stores that are doing $50,000 a month. And
Mm.
sometimes that knowledge that we have might be better because of that, but it also might not apply to them because they're not a store that's like 100 times bigger. It's just going to have different priorities and different areas to optimize. So I don't know, but I think people don't like change.
Mm.
It's just like natural with humans. So if you're going to get a human to change that doesn't want to, you need to incentivize them enough. And sometimes even just giving them the data to say like, we find like a store that does this action, makes this, so you should do it. That could be enough. And I think that works on me as well. Like when I get someone's like, doing this will make you more money. It's like, well, all right, then I'll do it. If someone's like, you should do this and it might help, but I don't really have the data to back that up. It's their word against yours.
Yeah, there might be some interesting like in-app stuff you could do with Metorik where it's just kind of like based on the corpus of data that you have across your network. Like if you just set up an abandoned cart email and you get 1% of conversions on that based on your existing revenue, you make this much more. There's probably like some interesting in-app nudges that you could do. But again, you say
Right.
you don't like doing that stuff, or you just don't.
No. I think I've just always hesitated, but it's not the right way forward. And like, one of the biggest challenges for us is because of the breadth of the stores. Like, we might have some doing CBD, but some doing books for kids to help them learn, and then someone's doing coffee. There's so many different stores, so you want to also give them like data that's relevant to their industry. So like we're right now in the middle of categorizing every single store, and it's a manual process. There's no automatic way to do it. So it's like a list of like 3,000 stores and like 50 categories, and just one by one going through them all. I think we'll know a lot more.
Yeah, this might be weird, but what could be like a cool way to tackle that is like grabbing all the images on the homepage and then just like classifying them with like Google's image recognition API. That. Be like the laziest way to do it, but it might work. I don't know. But if it notices dogs, it's like pet store.
Yeah, you're right. That's actually pretty cool. That'd be just cool as a service. Like I imagine that's something like Clearbit could have pretty easily. Just give them a site URL and they tell you the industry. They might even have that already, but I don't know. Like for them as a business to collect that data, your approach is pretty cool. Like take a screenshot and analyze it. Maybe they're already doing that. I'm sure they are. They know what they're doing. Yeah. But it's fun to like kind of hypothesize how these tech companies would solve these problems, like and how we would solve them.
And sometimes when you actually
that being said,
sometimes when you actually learn out how they are solving those problems, you're like, oh, that's a little bit dirty.
I don't want to know. That's too much. Yeah. But I'm grateful. Well, not grateful, but it would be a bit of an issue if we had like 10,000 or 20,000 to do manually, and maybe I needed then external service for that. But at least with like a few thousand, it's manageable and a few of us to do it. But it's also really fun, like just to discover some stores that I just didn't even realize that were using it, or ones that I'd spoken to 3 years ago and I just forgot, and now it's like rediscovering their website. And it's like so cool that they're using us and stuff like that. So it's pretty fun.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to have the data after. When we have these conversations again, I'll be able to say, well, did you know that CBD stores have 4.89% conversion rate on this?
I mean, that would kind of be kind of sick. Like, I don't think Shopify is going to come out with that kind of stuff. So it'd be kind of very cool to have an app developer release kind of like, I don't know, industry-related stats. MailChimp does that, right? Like, they've got their industry reports, and Baremetrics does that with their SaaS stuff. So
yeah, it's like it's the way it should. It's the way it should be. Like, keeping this data a secret does no one. It really only helps the people that get access to it. So it's only helping me or my executive team, or if I give it only to my customers, it's only helping them. And that could be a feature. So that's like an argument for doing that. But I think, especially with like what's going on in the world right now, right? Like a lot of people are, and I just don't have enough data to tweet, about it and be really confident in my numbers and understand. And I'm not a data scientist, and I just don't want to like, kind of, talk too much about stuff that I'm not an expert in, but at least with what's going on right now, it was really interesting for me just to look at a whole, like, and try to look at our stores that are using it and if they're like suffering as a business now because of it. And like something that was really interesting for me to see, again, I'm not sure how great the the health of this data is, but it kind of appears that there's only been a drop across like all the stores that are using us by like 5% to 10% on average. But it could be, one store's down 30, but one's up 30 as well. So that's why it's just not great averages. But it's really interesting to kind of look at that. And then when times like these are going on, to be able to actually share that data with people to give them hope or give them a better understanding of what's going on. And I know, like, as a SaaS business, whenever I see anyone tweeting about like, we're seeing across our data of 1,000 SaaS businesses, this is the way things are heading. And whether it's good or bad news, at least it gives me confidence in the ideas and the mental models I'm creating.
Sure. I mean, it keeps you involved in like the game, whatever game that you are playing, right? And I think it's kind of nice that if you play basketball, it's nice keeping up with basketball stats. Like,
even if you don't like understand them all.
Sure. Yeah. And same in like I do like a lot of gaming, right? And so like I like knowing actions per minute, stuff like that, where like I don't know, like may not improve me that much, but like I just like knowing additional stats about players and all that
context.
kind of
stuff. It all helps feed these mental models that we have in our mind about all these different things. So any data, as long as you've got room to like bring it into the model of it, can be useful. The problem is just when the data isn't there. So it's cool, like if businesses like you and I are able to generate enough valuable data and share it openly so that people can act on it. I know, like, that's on a large scale, but even on like a small scale, for me, like just having access years ago to see like their metrics when they were opening up all their data. Without that, I don't know how confident I would have been to quit my job and then try to do something similar like a SaaS business, but by being able just to anecdotally even hear or see the numbers that we're doing this much MRR and this is how long it took us to get here, it kind of fed my understanding of what would need to happen and then gave me the confidence to do it. So
very cool.
Yeah, I know, like, and that's why whenever I have the opportunity, and like we all go about it in different ways about how we share that information. But if I've ever got the chance to kind of talk to someone who's starting a SaaS and try to give them some of my like anecdotal experiences and stuff, I just hope that it can fit, all that data will just feed into like how they're thinking about it and might give them confidence or might steer them in a different direction that helps them, or it might do the opposite. But any data is normally better than no data, right?
I think that's true. I think it's more true on the e-commerce side than maybe any other industry at the moment. Like most retail outlets operate on zero competitive data. SaaS is probably too transparent at times. And e-com, I mean, you don't really have much other than reading blogs, and most e-commerce stores stay really quiet because they don't want anyone approaching on their niches or their space.
And I'm just like, well, I don't know if I want to build a business that is so sensitive to even one person potentially competing with me. And like that, I always get that question all the time, like, are you scared of competitors? And I'm like, I've got competitors and maybe I'm their competitor, and it doesn't matter. It's not like I need to have every single store in the world using my product and paying me, or it's a failure. Like a success can still be 50 customers or 100 customers. And It just, I guess, depends on the person and how they consider success. And I think a lot of people that ask that question, like, do you see your competitors? To them, their measure of success is like in dominance over everyone and complete control of an industry, and these things that are not really attainable, especially if you're like just having a chat with someone and just asking those questions. I don't know if you're the person that's going to be that one to dominate the whole industry. So it's kind of ironic that how they measure success is something that they can never attain.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if we go back to the watering hole example, like you only want to drink with a handful, and for you that's success as long as that's like, you're drinking from the watering hole, it's happy, healthy, everyone's getting along. That's probably like a good space for you to be in, versus going in and just trying to like destroy all the competition and take all the water for yourself.
Oh man,
that stuff's really toxic.
I just like every day there's a new store or 100 new stores, and like there's plenty of room for everyone. And if there isn't, well then the better products are going to win, and that's all there is to it. And then you just adapt to it. It's like even I get questions like people, are you scared about because WooCommerce improves their built-in reports? Like, is that an issue for you? And I'm like, if it is, it is. If it isn't, it isn't. But I'm like, at least in my case, that was something where like a lot of people probably looked at that and thought, oh, this is going to be a big issue for Bryce, because it's like now built into the app. It's not like an add-on, so every single store has access to this. I can tell you the number of customers, at least to my knowledge, that I know have cancelled because of that thing which everyone thought would be a big like threat to me, has been zero. Like maybe a couple that never replied to my like emails to say why'd you cancel. Maybe a couple of them was because of that, but it's just, I think even what people, I guess my point there is that even what people presume is the biggest threat is probably not. And to me, even I thought, like, if you had to ask me what's the biggest threat to competitor or what they're doing, I'm like, I guess what they're doing could be an issue, but you don't really know till it is. And even a lot of these things, there's a big lag in when they happen. It's same like with Corona, and we might not feel the impact for months, like as SaaS businesses, even though we will feel it, or maybe we won't. By then, we've had time to adapt and accommodate the change that'll happen. So I guess, I'm not sure. That's my ramblings on that.
No, that's good. I'm starting to fade, so I'm happy to wrap this up if you are. But this is a really fun chat. I kind of enjoyed just riffing randomly about starting at platforms and then ending with all this.
Yeah, man. We should do it again more. I think it's fun to talk about, especially the SaaS stuff. For me, it's really fun to chat about, since it's there aren't, even though there are so many, I don't know how many there are with like individual founders behind it that are kind of in the trenches of it. And so it's fun to always chat with others that are going through that, because there's a lot of things to relate on, but not a lot of people to relate with about it.
Sure. I mean, anytime you want to chat, man, I'm always happy to jump on the blower and fucking riff on here for an hour and then post that up online. Yeah. I think as well the e-commerce side needs a little bit more love. Like, I think that there are kind of people doing SaaS in the trenches, building and talking about it, whether that's on like podcasts and stuff, but there's probably less that on the, I don't know, people building stuff on the e-commerce side, which is kind of like where I got the idea. Like, there are lots of drop shipping content and there's lots of that kind of stuff, but there's less so, I don't know, people building real businesses or large businesses. And maybe it's just because like it's hard for them to find time, because like
that's probably it, right?
Yeah.
But I've been thinking about doing something like that, but I don't want to do just like another podcast. But I guess just because I have these direct relationships, and like you would have with like so many of these big e-commerce stores, I want to like kind of talk to them and learn from them and share what works for them, but also maybe I can offer something to them in exchange, which is some knowledge that I have, so that there's value for them as well. But I'm also hesitant to just do like another podcast. So I've been trying to do these like customer stories, but they always end up being, you have to make them into sales material. So
and I think that's why, like, that's kind of why I framed with this is like, I'm going to build a website and I'm going to ask my friends to help and I'm just going to do it. Just record it. And like, I don't know, if I keep it, it's like at the end, if no one watches it, I have a website and potentially a business. And if other people watch it, cool, then sick.
Even with my one, like, and that kind of fizzled away, I took it off the marketing side at one point, and then I got a message the next day, like, where is it? I always reference it as like something that I look at for your thoughts or something. I don't know. They were like, the people were missing it the day after, and I thought no one was even reading it. So
that's so funny.
I think, we underestimate the value people will get out of stuff.
Yeah, sure. So I'm gonna start recording now.